How many people here work in healthcare? Oh, that's good. How many people actually build models, healthcare predictive models, anything like that? Okay, good, good, good. So you guys can hit me up for questions later on, definitely. And so that's pretty much what I'm going to be talking about. And where I'm at, I work in my background, my PhD is in experimental psychology. I'm an old school quant guy, structural equation modeling and all that kind of fun stuff, all kinds of regression variations. My big thing, I spent years in retail, B2B and B2C retail. So what I'm used to dealing with are incredibly huge, dirty data sets. So for example, how many people are familiar with the Evariant data? So essentially you have 240 million rows, and let's say 800-900 columns. Add the Equifax data to that, add the knowledge base data to that, and you're talking probably about 250 million rows and maybe 2,000 columns. What I have to have, and if I want to do good modeling on a very, very fast basis, is I need a flat file that I can access that's clean on the front end, that I can just fly through my modeling, okay? So that kind of gives you the context of why this conference is really important to me, because all of my work in healthcare analytics is based upon the quality of the data that I get, what I can do with that data, and then once I start plugging my data into my programs and whatnot, that's when... Well, my tag's banging on my microphone. Okay. They've intervened on me already. Okay. You know, I'll tell you. Keeps me off the streets, you know? But I'll tell you about that part of my research. You know, I do a lot of qualitative research back in the day from an academic side, a lot of public health stuff. I used to tromp around. How many people have tromped around in abandoned buildings looking for old needles from heroin addicts? Oh, the hands aren't shooting in the air. Well, that's qualitative public health research. That's fascinating research. And speaking of qualitative research, one of the things that's really, really cool, there was I've noticed there's a couple people here that are into mining qualitative text data. That's huge, absolutely huge in healthcare and a lot of areas, in a lot of other areas. And for the healthcare people, one of the things that you may or may not know about that we'd really like to get our hands on are being able to do almost real-time analyses on charting notes, nurses' charting notes, physicians' charting notes, and so on and so forth. So that being said, I'll try and fly through the presentation. I'm generally kind of squirrely, so I like to take an hour-long presentation and just bang it out in a half an hour. So I'll do the best I can to get you through this. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about the reality of what I do related to healthcare, but also try and tie it into why it's so important, back to the data point that I mentioned earlier, why it's so important to be working with people who know big data and understand big data and who can handle big data very quickly, very efficiently, with a high degree of validity. All my clients want, they don't even know what validity is, they just want it. So I have to explain that to them based on what I do. So my little abstract here, so we've partnered with DataRobot, and we have several other partners as well, but what we basically do is I build multivariate predictive models, and the thing that I really, really like about DataRobot is that it's incredibly flexible, it's faster than hell, and it lets me do exactly what I want to do almost nearly real time because it's so fast and efficient. And that's what I'm looking for. I need tools that will allow me to do my job very, very quickly based on those files that I was talking about, those huge files. And this little quote at the bottom is one of my guys who helps me build models. DataRobot helps in automating many routine processes like finding important variables, variable transformation, selection, model building, and scoring. As a result, we data analyst scientists have more time for analytical thinking, because what I have my team do is, that's great, run the models, let's get the models out of the way, but come up with the next best thing. So put on your development hat at the same time we're banging out these models, and it's an incredible win-win situation. So that's the intro. Here's the overview of healthcare. Now, for the people that know healthcare, this is probably very, very familiar. For the people who don't know healthcare, this is kind of a little primer on what we do. Big data related to healthcare, what's going on. The majority of my clients are small, medium, and large, all the national healthcare systems. They have huge data sets. Think of all the patient data. Just to give you a little math behind patient data, the average individual goes to a physician, goes to the doctor 3 times a year. So 3 times a year, you're getting like a receipt. Think about, you go to the grocery store, you buy 10 things. What's on your receipt? Lettuce, tomatoes, burgers, so on and so forth. When you go to the doctor, you walk out for a typical visit, there's 10 line items on your visit data. We call that the visit data file. So the reason I mention that is because you can see quickly how things snowball and get huge. So you have 10 of those a year, and they did the blood pressure, they weighed you, they did a quick assessment, they looked in your eyes, they looked in your ears. So each one of those little line items from the visit has a specific code, and so that data set for that visit, like I said, the average person has three visits a year, or 3 visits a year times 10 items per visit times 240 million consumers, and those aren't even including the people that are under the age of 18. That does not include homeless and children, okay? So think of how massive those data sets really, really are. I got to roll them all up to the individual level and start working from that particular point. So our goal is on a mission to move healthcare providers to the cloud with the data and analytics required to confidently identify and execute the most important strategic growth, patient engagement, and physician alignment initiatives. And basically, our product at Evariant is this huge platform that you can use for your entire healthcare system. Okay, and I'll talk about that a little bit. What I'm going to be talking about today is this first bullet. What I do is identify and I target patients and non-patients who are likely candidates, okay, most likely from a predictive modeling standpoint for various healthcare services. And I'll talk about how we break those services out a little bit. And the healthcare industry, and I have another slide I'm going to talk about in a second here. One, how many people have heard of volume-based versus value-based modeling? Okay, so all the volume value people, you kind of know what's going on. The big thing right now is volume-based modeling is basically where I'm a healthcare system and I say, I'm going to do as many mammography screenings as I possibly can because the ROI attached to each mammography screening is X. If I jack that up, guess what? I'm going to make a lot more money. That's volume-based. Get them in, provide the service, bill them, and you're fine, okay? Value-based, you're doing the same thing, but you're including mammography as a smaller part of the women's healthcare clinic / program. Not only is she coming in for the mammography, but she's also coming in for all the female OBGYN, gyno health, and so on and so forth. So they might not be making as much on the front end. However, all those health services provided by the women's care center are provided, and the big thing related to long-term ROI and patient and client loyalty is that you're going to have, if that person buys into the system, and they like it. They like the physicians, they like the service, they like the way they're treated, and so on and so forth. Now you have loyalty. If you build in loyalty, now you have a customer who's going to be your patient / customer as long as he or she is still part of that healthcare system. And if they don't change jobs and they don't change insurance, guess what? You're going to have that person probably for the next 10, 15, 20 years. So value-based models are sort of contextual. It's kind of like creating a derived variable, right? And it's very, very popular right now. We have things like urgent care models. What's an urgent care model? Oh, how can I drive traffic in my urgent care center? Some of you might know that if you go to the urgent care and need an x-ray, let's say you pay $100. If you go to the ER and have that same x-ray, it's $300. So if you're a healthcare system, where do you want people to go for x-rays? Okay, you're going to make $200 more if you can get them to go to your ER. However, if your ER gets too crowded, you're going to get busted by the ER police, which is the federal government, who's going to say you can't have your ER that stacked. So what are you going to do? So that's kind of where a lot of healthcare is going. They're trying to drive traffic into different areas in the healthcare system. Okay, so this is what I just talked about. And it's just a little visual. It kind of explains the curve number 2. Okay, that's your, oops. I don't know how that happened. Curve number 2, that's your value-based. Curve number 1 is your volume-based. And it's the natural trajectory is that volume-based is going to flatten out after a while. Volume-based means that once you max out your prospects, okay, and every prospect in your pool has the service they're supposed to have, you're pretty much done with that deal. It's not a bad thing. There's nothing at all wrong with volume-based modeling, okay? Volume-based modeling is incredibly lucrative, right? And anyone in this room who's into sales at all, you know that sometimes there's a huge advantage to having a huge profit on the front end. Because if you have a huge profit on the front end, you can compensate for a slowdown later on. It doesn't matter. So if they make a boatload of money on the first couple of years from a volume-based service, and things slow down for 2 or 3 years, if they made enough money on the front end, they're going to be fine, you know, through the down times. A lot of businesses that are still doing okay now, with the economic problems we had, a lot of those businesses had built up quite a cash on the front end, okay, before the economic decline hit. So this is just kind of a visual to give you guys an idea of what I'm talking about with the volume versus value. And this, I believe, this presentation, it's somewhere, it's available somewhere. And if you need it, just contact any of us. We'll get you this presentation. Now, the two points at the top. This is when I say I build models. Every time I build a model, I build 2 models. Okay. And I'm always building, for those of you with how many people are just basic marketing, have marketing background, okay? Done predictive modeling and marketing. Well, a patient model, the first one, a patient model is a model that I build and I have the patient data in my data set, which is really, really important. My patient models are generally much more robust because I have patient data. Think of patient data, it's like retail data. That's the transactional data. I know when they came, I know how long they stayed, I know what they were billed for, I know that everything that happened at those particular visits. And all this is protected data, by the way. It's all protected by HIPAA. But in any case, the patient data is kind of neat to work with because it's very, very rich, right? But it's easy. It's predictable. If you know modeling, marketing, and so on and so forth, those are your classic cross-sell, upsell, retention models, okay? I'm going to sell additional services to my patients. I'm going to upsell additional services to my patients. And if I do a good job, they're going to stay with me for a long time. Now, the trickier models, actually the funner models to build, are what we call the non-patient models. These are the consumer models. These are the models where you're, let's say, I'll use an example from this particular area because it's kind of occurring right now. Mass General, if you're from this particular area, Mass General is a very, what we call, aggressive healthcare system. So Mass General is kind of out there trying to, I wouldn't say take over, but Mass General is doing a good job providing a lot of the healthcare services in the greater Boston area, including southern Maine, southern Vermont, southern New Hampshire. Mass General is all over the place. Some of the smaller healthcare systems are sort of getting eaten up and gobbled up by Mass General. Tufts, for example, things like that. Just that's the way it works in the industry, okay? Now, what's interesting about the non-patient models, those non-patients, okay, those are potential patients that are not in my healthcare system, okay? But I can model those non-patients and I can build predictive models to find the non-patients that look most like the people I want to go after. How do I do that? I append proprietary third-party data. So I append the Evariant data. I have a lot of sort of special proprietary data sets that I use as well as the Evariant data. So I simply take the, I just get literally that 240 million record file I was talking about, the national consumer file. I just grab that. I do whatever my client's geo footprint is, okay, their target market geo footprint, that's what I use. And then I pull out every single consumer that's not a patient from that target geo footprint, and that's my consumer file. And then I can take my algorithm, I can score the consumer file because I have those same appended variables on both data sets, and then I can find the prospects that are not patients that look just like my patients. Now, the advantage to the patient data is that in the patient data I have I have all the diagnostic information. I have all the codes, I have what we call DRG codes, ICD codes, CPT codes, I have all the fun stuff. But I also have some, in the non-patient data, I have some proprietary third-party data. Some people might know it as the ailments data, and some other proprietary data that sort of is a proxy for diagnostic and medication information. So I literally do have medication information on patients that I've never seen before, right? So my non-patient models, even though they're a little trickier to build, they're a blast because you can build incredibly nice, robust models without even having any patient data. So that's really, really nice to be able to do that. And that's actually the fun part of the job, is building those non-patient models. This is sort of, I call it the big data slide. If you look at those ovals on the left, I'm not going to go over them in a lot of detail. Think of those ovals on the left. Those are all parts of the platform that we at Evariant sell. So we sell a healthcare system, a platform. Each one of those ovals includes a whole bunch of data. Okay? We do the physician analytics and data. We do the patient analytics and data. There's several aspects to this particular platform. So from a data standpoint, you can do, it's one-stop shopping for all of your data needs for a particular healthcare system. You can do campaign ROI, you can run all your campaigns through there, you can do visual views, you can do list polls, you can do pre-selects, you can do everything in the particular platform. I'm only talking about a very, very tiny piece of this today because I'm only talking about the propensity modeling. The propensity modeling is one little oval, okay? But the reason I show this slide is because this is another example of how there's a lot of sort of flexibility with this volume-based paradigm that we're in right now. Most healthcare systems right now do both. And as I said earlier, there's nothing wrong with value-based modeling. There's nothing wrong with volume-based modeling. No healthcare systems do just one. But the better healthcare systems are doing kind of it's just on a continuum. Some of their models might be value-based, some of their models might be volume-based, and that third line down, the needs, what we call the needs continuum, that's kind of what dictates whether they're doing a value or a volume-based model. And I just like to show this slide because it just kind of gives you a good idea of how I see the data world in healthcare modeling. Now, so what I'm going to show you now is when generally when I do presentations, I sort of set it up where if I'm in the audience, what do I want to hear? But more importantly, if I'm in the audience, what don't I want to hear? I don't want boring stats. I don't want the stuff that drives me nuts. And I generally don't like to repeat a whole bunch of stuff on my slides. So the way I do my presentations is if I was in the audience, I'm selfish. What do I want to hear? What do I want to see? Okay? Cut to the chase. Tell me what's really going on. I don't need to read. I know how to read, so don't read off the slides. Because I'm also a professor, and that's what I tell. I ding them if they do that. All my students who present live, if they read off their slides, they lose points. It's like, and I tell my students, we can all read, so don't read for us. Tell us what's not on the slide, and then they get A's, and the student world's a happy place at that point. So what I'm going to do here, this is literally what I do when I go back to a client. And show them, I'm going to show you parts of some of the results of what I actually do with the predictive modeling. And there's generally three pieces when I do a debriefing. So a client they might have as part of their contract, they're doing 30 propensity models as part of their contract. And, they might be doing mammography models, prostate models, AFib models, bariatric models, a couple of cardios, a couple of orthos. They have a special sports medicine model. So in their contract, it says how many models they have. And again, like I said, every time I build a model, I build two models. I build the patient model, I build the non-patient model. And then generally most of my clients do their models in chunks or clusters. So they, for example, right now, a lot of our clients are starting out with their budgeted 2015, 2016 campaigns that are going to carry them through the next year. So the majority of the clients I build models for pretty much already know what they're going to do from a marketing standpoint for the next year. So in other words, 60-70% of their budgets have already been earmarked for particular campaigns. And my recommendation is always, well, if the majority of your budget in marketing is already going for these campaigns, let's start with those particular models. And we can enhance what they're already doing with their marketing campaigns by aligning and by paralleling the models that are going out with what they're already doing from their marketing campaigns. So what I'm helping them do is increasing their response rates for campaigns that a lot of them have already done before. So when I go through a debrief, I give them an overview. This is what we did. This is how we did it. This is why we did it. I talk about the modeling process. A couple of boring slides here. And then I show them the actual visual out. I show them the drivers, the algorithms, lift charts, all the kind of fun stuff. The stuff that I like that they generally don't like very much, but they need to hear it. So this is a little bit about what I talked about earlier. The first bullet up there, the patient demographics, patient information, that's unique to the patient data. I don't have that on the non-patient consumer data. The patient visit data history, very, very, if you've ever dealt with medical data before, that's the messy stuff. That's the dirty stuff. It's just massive amounts of data with lots and lots and lots of missing cells. There's lots of empty cells in the data. What happens for a lot of the times in healthcare is that someone goes to the doctor, again, they get that. You'll look at the data set and you'll have 10 rows of the 10 things that happened at the visit, but 8 of those 10 rows, 95% of the cells are blank. because they just didn't fill them in, because all they really care about are the 2 primary diagnostic codes in the first 2 rows. But you're stuck with these 8 nearly empty rows of data, and you have, there's decision rules I use for dealing with that. And then starting at that 3rd bullet, appended consumer data, okay? Experian, Equifax, Knowledge Base, all the big data providers, pretty much. People ask me all the time, well, which is the best one? Which would you choose at the end of the day if you had to pick one? I'd probably go with Experian. I've used all of them. All of them have their pros and their cons, but at the end of the day, they're almost the same. Okay? It's about the best you can get, okay, in terms of appended third-party data, oftentimes, and a lot of the data that they won't tell you is modeled data. It's not the real consumer data. It's modeled data. They do a lot of block modeling. How many people here do, anyone do block modeling? Census-type modeling? You just grab a zip code and give everyone that same median home value because they're in the same block. That type of thing. They do that all the time. They just don't tell us that, okay? And I don't mean they, Experian. I mean in that third-party compiled data world, that's the norm. That's what they do. They do a lot of block modeling. But a lot of the data that's in there, you have lifestyle, socio-demographic, socioeconomic information, a lot of health behavior, hobbies, interests, how people spend their money, where they spend their money, are they technologically savvy, do they read a lot of books, hundreds and hundreds of variables. My general Experian layout has about 400 variables on it, add about 200 more for the ailments and medications. So they're very rich data sets. Incredibly, if you like just building models and seeing what happens, they're fantastic data sets to work with. So those are my data sets that I work with. So I'm going to talk about this cardio model here. Now, so I'm going to show you a couple of slides. I'm going to go through 3 levels of results. One of the things, and this looks really basic, and a lot of people are probably saying, well, it's just real basic information. But from a marketing modeling standpoint, this is huge, okay? This is classic. This is from a patient, these are the patient demographics for gender from a patient cardio model. And what you notice, there's always 2 things on the descriptive stat slides. And on the left, you're going to see frequency. On the right, you're going to see market value. Essentially, market value, all it is market penetration. Most of you probably think of the market value, you refer to it as penetration. So what's interesting about this, and this is the way my clients think. If you look on the left-hand side, okay, the orange bars are the patients. The blue bars, the orange bars are the patients that have the condition. In this case, it's cardio, right? So the orange bars are patients that have had cardio procedures in this healthcare organization. The blue bars are patients who have not had cardio procedures. Now, the first thing you notice, obviously, you have a lot more activity with the males. Okay? Males and cardio, they kind of go hand in hand. That's the easy part. That's the no-brainer. I don't have to say anything. You look at the slide and that's what you see. From a penetration standpoint, what you see is for the males, you see penetration at 158. The market value is 158. All that means is that male patients, okay, males are 1.6, almost 1.6 times more likely to be a cardio patient. Okay? That's important, but it's also very obvious. Okay? So, what you would want, this is when it comes in really, really handy from a predictive modeling standpoint. I expect gender to be a significant predictor in my algorithm. In fact, it better be a significant predictor in my algorithm. If it's not, I got to go see what's wrong with the algorithm. Okay? Because that's a pretty decent penetration value. But even that's really obvious. Okay? What's not obvious, there's a couple of things, and this is where the contextual knowledge of the area you work in comes in really, really handy. One of the things we know is that females in general are not marketed to for cardio. Okay? Females are underserved when it comes to cardio. And females' rates of cardio problems is almost the same as males. However, traditionally, historically, cardio has always been marketed to males. So the gold mine, from a marketing standpoint, from a predictive modeling standpoint, the gold mine is, are you marketing to women at all? If so, how are you doing it? Because the reason why that's so important, if you look at the blue bar on the left, okay, almost 70% of this patient base is women. But they're spending all their energy trying to get the males. They know they're going to get the males. They don't even have to advertise and they're still going to get the males. What are they doing to get the females in? What would happen is if they switched their marketing tactics a little bit and went after females and they jacked up that blue bar on the right for females, if you get some over-penetration with the females there, your ROI just on using gender alone to tweak your algorithm is going to go through the roof. But that's the one thing that they never see. So what I do when I debrief is I try and explain that. Okay, we know about the males. You guys are probably doing a great job already. You know, let me see what you're doing. What are you sending to these people? And they give me their 4x6 double-sided glossy postcards, and it's a picture of a guy. You know, kind of like you see, like the Viagra as a guy. You know, it's like the guy's going to have a heart attack. He looks like he's going to have a heart attack. You know, but where's the women in the cardio marketing materials? Right? That's what we got to figure out. So the gold mine here is you got to market to women, but that's not obvious when you look at these slides. Here's another one that's really interesting. Cardio problems tend to happen more with the older folks and so on and so forth. And if you just look to the right really, really quick, you see there's two groups that have the highest over-penetration, right? And of course, they're widowers and divorcees, right? The two highest stress groups for relationship status, right? That makes total sense from a cardio standpoint, because if you're a widow or a widower, that's very stressful. And if you're divorced or, having problems with your relationship, well, that's going to be high stress and so on and so forth. So the higher the stress, the higher risk you are for cardio problems. So we should probably get you in at least for a screening. But what's interesting about what you want to look at is if you go back to the left-hand side, married couple. Now this is the gold mine for this slide. Has anyone ever done marketing, retail marketing on the consumer side? Okay, this is what's cool about marketing. Married couples. Married couples are a gold mine. What's so interesting about married couples, and some of you might know this, when it comes to purchasing behaviors, females are the driver. Okay? Now, generally what happens, especially in the third-party compiled data world, the information is rolled up to the male head of household. So what you'll find is when you have a husband and a wife living at a household and they roll up the data to the household level, they're usually rolling the data up to the male's data because the male's the default head of household. So basically they get a new washer, they get a new dryer, and so on and so forth. She picked it out, and they got it because of her. He just put it on his credit card. Who bought it? She bought it. He paid for it. Does that make sense? So who do you want to market to? You want to market to her, not to him. He's just hanging out with his credit card. Okay, honey, or whatever you want. Same thing, though. Think about this. And if you're in a relationship, right, especially if you're a guy, did you go in and get your prostate screening because you woke up one day and said, yeah, I can't wait? Or did you go and get your prostate screening because the wife or the girlfriend was like picking at you every day? Honey, did you do it yet? Honey, did you go in yet? Did you call your doctor yet? Honey. Guys, we kind of do the same thing with women in the mammography thing. Honey, did you go in? Did you have a mammography? I hate those things. You got to go. It runs in your family. You just got to go. That whole thing. In relationships, oftentimes what we do is we go for the opposite spouse. If it's a female procedure, go after the male. He'll keep prodding her along. Get in there, honey. You got to go in. Think of the kids. You don't want to die before the kids. Don't you want to see your kids, your grandkids? And it's like, and use anything you can get to get them to go to the doctor. But this is the little gold mine on this slide is take advantage of the married couples. Okay, you can completely jack your response rates up because of that. And what's interesting is when relationship status is one of the predictors in the algorithm. Okay, I want to make sure it's there because I want to make sure I weight that and deal with that accordingly. This one's real simple. This one's real basic. We know that what's obvious is cardio, older folks. Okay, you have your over-penetration for your 3 oldest age groups. That's great. That's clear as a bell. However, think about the value-based models I was talking about. Okay, and what we're talking about here, if you look at these two groups. Okay, the 45 to 64-year-olds, they're under-penetrated, but if you add these two groups up, guess what? This is the future for your value-based cardio models. This is the prevention stuff. These are the people you get in now for the screenings. They're not going to have stents. They're not going to have triple bypass surgeries, but you can certainly get them in for their once-a-year screenings. Guess what? They may not have the massive heart attacks later on, but if they live to be 90, and they live to be 100, you've just gotten probably at least 3 visits a year out of that person because they didn't die when they were 60 from a massive coronary heart attack, right? There's a huge gold mine from a modeling standpoint sitting in this underserved group. And healthcare systems traditionally don't go after the next best group. When the older folks die, the younger folks have to fill the pipe. Shouldn't you get them in with all these screenings? So that's all the kind of contextual stuff that doesn't pop out, okay, in the descriptives that we include in these healthcare models. This is a real, how many people are familiar with Mosaics? These are just socio-demographic clusters from Evariant. All the major compilers have these, okay? You have things called niches. Equifax has niches. And you have like Prisma clusters and things like that. I won't talk about these very much. Now, this particular slide, this is simply anyone who's ever built an algorithm. This is one way, one of many ways to present an algorithm to a client. Because they don't, if you show the math, if you give them a logistic regression equation, it's like deer in the headlights. You can't do it. They just don't know what you're talking about. So what I do is I present it this way, okay? And I say, well, here's the variable name, here's the variable description, here's the direction of the predictor, and I only show them the top 8 or the top 10. I never go more than 8 or 10. My algorithm might have 30 predictors in it, but I'm only going to pull out the top predictors. And in this particular case, this is a predictive algorithm for a patient cardio model. And as expected, if you look at the strongest predictor, the rank 1, strongest predictor is comorbidity. Comorbidity is simply what are all the factors most related to cardio that are not included in my cardio flag. I want comorbidity on a patient model is always going to be my first or second strongest predictor. If it's not, I have something wrong with my algorithm. But this is exactly what I want it to be. So the higher the comorbidity, okay, the higher the predictive strength from a positive standpoint. Exact age. Age, you already saw on the age slide, I better have age in there. And age should be my second, maybe third strongest predictor. And it is, which is fantastic. So this, what I always tell my clients in terms of when I show them the algorithms, and I say, well, just look at it for a second, and then I'll have this silence. And I'll say, I'll bet 80% of what's in that equation you already know. Okay? And it validates what they already know. So they can kind of tell themselves, well, we're doing a pretty good job here. We know what we're talking about. It's the 20% they don't know about that I really, really like to talk about when I present these. So again, we have age as the second strongest predictor. Mosaics. Now mosaics are kind of neat because, and I'm not going to get into the reason why including mosaics, it's not an issue of multicollinearity because of the way that third-party data work, and they work really, really well. You can have a certain level of multicollinearity. It has to do with direct versus indirect. But in any case, these are the top mosaics, socio-demographic, socioeconomic clusters that are predictive. And mosaics in the patient model should always, again, be in the top 5 from a predictive strength standpoint. So this is just kind of a nifty, pretty straightforward, regular patient cardio algorithm. Family history is in there now. Family history is another one of those variables you can only get from the patient data. There's actually special diagnostic codes in one of the code sets that is the family history flag. So especially the cancers, the cardios, the mammographies, the orthopedics, and so on and so forth, they all have these standing family history flags. And if that family history flag shows up, that individual is a really good target for services. So family history, ethnicity. Now, these down here, these awareness, this awareness profile, I build a lot of composite variables. I have a lot of derived variables. One of the things I do is I create these composites based on sets of pro-health behaviors, for example, and I have different pro-health behaviors for different conditions. Do you go to the gym? Do you read fitness magazines? Do you work out? Do you exercise? Okay. Do you go to McDonald's? Do you never get off your couch? Do you, I have the slacker variable. So I have negative predictors and positive predictors. They're all derived variables. And if you when you work with compiled data for as long as you get to know patterns. Okay? There's a whole boatload of variables that every time you run a model on an old person, they should pop. Okay? Old people do things in a certain way. What's interesting about the old people models is that all those variables in the Evariant data set relating to reading, and I always tell my young students, it's like we have these things. They're called books. And they were made out of paper. And you glued the pages together on the back. It was called a binding, right? And it's like, no, because my 18-year-olds, they don't read books, And it's like, when it's like, here's the syllabus for the class, and they get the online book. right? They never touch the damn book. It's pretty cool. You know, I don't know if I could have done it that way. But then, of course, the young people, when I do models on young people, all those techno flags should pop. There's a lot of techno flags in the Evariant data, right? Grandma who's 85 isn't going to have a high techno score. But the 21-year-old sports medicine ortho kid will, right? So that's why I build those variables. They work incredibly well in models, but that's kind of that experiential thing with working with the data for years. So this is just, you know, it's a long-winded way of kind of talking about the predictive algorithm. And then this, same thing on the non-patient side. What's interesting about this, notice in this particular algorithm, all you really got to do is look at the first column and then the third column, the description. There's no patient information. Okay, I have no patient data whatsoever in my non-patient models, but the predictive strength, the predictors in the model, okay, are very, very similar. And I have the ailments data, what we call the proxy for diagnostic and medication information, are working in this particular model. That is the proxy for having actual patient information, right? What's interesting about the non-patient models, they're almost as robust as the patient models, okay? A lot of people would assume that, oh, if you don't have patient data, your models are going to be very weak. They'll still be statistically significant, but they're going to be weak, okay? The predictive strength is just not going to be very good. That's not necessarily true depending on the diagnostic condition. So surprisingly, the non-patient models are really, really powerful in a lot of cases, right? The more homogeneous the sample, the more powerful the non-patient models are in particular, and the more heterogeneous the sample, you know, the robustness goes down a little bit. But you would expect that with heterogeneity anyways. And then, of course, lift. Lift is a big deal. This is about as far as I go with sophisticated high-end statistics with the clients. Because they don't have time. All they care about is, well, who do I grab? Who do I target? What do I want to do? The way I present lift is this. I show them the lift table and I show them the chart. I say, look at the chart, okay? See that line where it says 1.0? I said, the only thing you need to care about is anything above that line means that those particular prospects, okay? So literally, so I take an algorithm, I score a file, everyone in the file has a score, I rank order the scores, I decile that distribution, okay? My best prospects with the highest scores are in decile 1, so on and so forth, and then I create my lift chart. And what I tell my clients is anyone above the line, okay, any deciles that are above that line have a greater than probability chance of looking like the group that you modeled. So in this particular case, there's 3 deciles, okay, that have a greater than probability chance. Now, from a marketing analytics standpoint, what that means to my client is if they have a campaign, let's say they have 100,000 in this distribution. And if you think about a 4x6 double-sided glossy postcard for a mammography or a cardio screening campaign, it costs about 24 cents a pop to print those, and it's about 14 cents a pop bulk mailing, okay? So that's 40 cents, something around 40 cents, multiplied by 100,000. Well, what if I told you that you can probably get at least 85% of those responders that you would have got had you sent all 100,000 if you only just grabbed the prospects from the top 3 deciles, right? So that 100,000 times 40 cents, subtract 70% of that, that's all you need to spend to get almost the same response rate. So from a marketing standpoint for healthcare providers, that's a huge savings. We always say email's cheap, email's free, email everybody. Okay, it's not going to cost anything. But when you get into the mail, the snail mail, and with older folks traditionally respond very well to good old snail mail. Junk mail, old people love it. They like it. They're very comfortable with that, especially when they know the logo. And if they've been in healthcare system X for 20 years and they see that little Mercy Healthcare logo coming there, they're going to open it. They're going to sit at their little coffee table with their leaving that letter openers. You know, they use those things. And it's another one for Mercy, honey. You know, and come on in for your screening. I'm there. Okay. So that's the takeaway here. Don't waste your time with those 7 deciles that have a less than probability chance, right? You only need to market to the top 3 deciles. And then they really, really resonate. And in fact, the majority of our clients, when they pull their leads, when they pull their prospects, they pull simply based on the lift charts. Two last slides I'll talk about. One of them is sort of the best practices. And you have best practices from a modeling standpoint, best practices from a healthcare marketing standpoint, and I like to include this in one. There's another slide that I don't include that's a little more statsy, but I don't include it for this presentation. And I like to explain to my clients, we do our due diligence on my end. I'm huge on validation. I'm huge on doing all kinds of funky things with sampling. Sampling with replacement, sampling without replacement, pulling abstract, weird samples from other places, and running. I want to run my algorithm on everything I can possibly run it on, and if it works, it works. It's always going to work on the obvious, but let me run the algorithm on a couple other things and just see what happens. So I love validating algorithms. And just a little plug for DataRobot. One of the things I'm able to do with DataRobot, because it's so dang fast, is that I can run all these validation models in kind of a weird way really, really, really fast and pull in any sample I want to and then run my validation against that, and it's fantastic. All the other programs I use to do that take more time. I can do it, but they're clunkier, right? And I need clean, I need fast, I need efficient, and so on and so forth. But the two takeaways on this slide, there's two best practices. And that comes up in healthcare all the time. One, and a lot of you that do predictive modeling, your clients will always ask you, well, how often do you refresh the model? And then I say, can you clarify, do you mean refresh the model or do you mean rebuild the model? Okay? The refresh means in healthcare, how often am I getting the updated patient data? Most healthcare systems, I have a feed and it's coming in about once a month. Sometimes bi-monthly, but usually it's once a month. So I'll get the new data, it'll come in, I'll clean it, do my song and dance, run the algorithm against the new patient data, okay? That's the refresh. I'm refreshing the model based on the cadence that's been set up with the client. The model rebuild on the B2C side, on the consumer side of things, you and I were talking about B2B earlier. On the B2C side, you really want to only go out about a year, okay? So I'm going to rebuild the model no matter what after about 365 days. That's about the cycle on a B2C model. And a lot of B2C models are actually less than a year. B2B models, business-to-business models, you can actually go a little bit longer than a year, but even with B2B models, I like to keep it no more than 2 years, okay? So I explained to the clients it's very, very important that you know the difference between a refresh and a rebuild, okay? And then this is sort of the last slide, and this is it's really simple. If you're in marketing or you're even indirectly involved with marketing, this is sort of where the rubber meets the road, and this is sort of a classic overview of a campaign. In this particular case, it's a breast cancer screening campaign. Steps 1, 2, and 3 are pretty basic, okay? Find your best prospects, what's the campaign built on, what's the point, what's the purpose, what's the goal. But what I really try and emphasize on this slide more than anything else, if you look at step 5, and step 5, okay, when I was talking about validation and be able to run multiple validations on a regular basis, step 5 is what a lot of clients, and those of you who have done predictive modeling, especially in retail, you know that a lot of clients are terrible at this. In fact, there's some clients that never even do this. They don't do testing, right? They grab their best prospects, they send out what they send out, and they wait for the responders and they count their responders. All you have to do on step 5, and it's really, really easy, set up a couple of test cells, right? Don't send one postcard to all those women for the mammography screen. Send 3 postcards. One has one picture, one has another picture, one has another picture. When you get all your responders back, just do an analysis on them.